Good evening, dear insomniac. Come in. You've caught me in the middle of something if you don't mind waiting a moment while I finish. I've been swapping the paintings along the far wall, the ones near the reading chairs, and I'm just now hanging one that's rather special to me. A traveller left it behind a good while back, as a thank you for a night's shelter. She'd painted it herself, right here by the fire, of the view from the window nearest the door. I don't rotate that one out often, but tonight felt like the right night for it. There, that's better. It's always deserved a better spot than the hallway. Settle in wherever the fire reaches best. While I was down there, tucked behind the frame as I lifted it, I found a little jar of paint water gone cloudy blue, and beside it a story folded small enough to have been hidden on purpose, written, I'd wager, by that very same traveller, a girl with paint permanently under her fingernails, who told me, before she left, that she'd rather leave the story behind than carry it with her. I don't think she meant that unkindly. I think she simply trusted it to a good home. It's about a girl and her window and the city below it, and what happens when a painting doesn't just show you something, but makes it so. Get comfortable, dear insomniac. This is the Paintress of the sleeping city. High above the streets, in a small apartment with a big window, there lived a girl named Chloe. Chloe was 17, with long wavy hair that never quite behaved itself, no matter how she tied it back. And she loved two things above all others: the hour just before sleep, and the city she could see from her windowsill. Her building was one of the older ones, tucked between the taller, shinier towers that had gone up around it over the years, and her window faced west, out over all of it, a whole forest of rooftops and lit windows and blinking signal towers, stretching out until the buildings got small enough to blur into the dark. During the day, it was just a city, ordinary and unremarkable, but at night it turned into something else entirely. Every evening, once her homework was done and the dishes were dried and put away, Chloe would drag her little wooden stool up to the windowsill, lay out her paints in their usual order, fill her jar with water from the tap, and paint the city as it fell asleep. She had been given the paints by her grandmother on her 12th birthday. An old wooden box, its corners soft with handling, the tubes inside worn thin and rolled up neatly from the bottom. These were mine once, her grandmother had said, and my mother's before that. They like to be used properly, paint honestly, and they'll treat you kindly. Chloe had nodded politely at the time, the polite nod you give a grown-up's odd little instructions, and hadn't thought much more of it. It took her the better part of a year to understand what her grandmother had meant. It started small. One evening, painting the block across the street, Chloe noticed old Mr. Kettering's window boxes looked bare and a little sad. He'd mentioned, in passing, that his geraniums had died back in the cold snap, and he hadn't the heart to replace them. Without quite deciding to, Chloe painted them full and blooming anyway, red and cheerful against his windowsill, simply because she liked how much nicer it looked that way. The next morning, walking to school, she glanced up out of habit. Mr. Kettering's window boxes were full of geraniums, red and cheerful, exactly as she'd painted them. Chloe stopped dead on the pavement. She told herself she'd misremembered, that perhaps he'd bought new ones, and she simply hadn't noticed the change. But she went home that afternoon and pulled out the painting from the night before, and there they were, brushed in her own careful hand. Unmistakably, the same flowers now blooming 3 streets away. She didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear, exactly. More from the enormous, dizzy feeling of a question that had just gotten much, much bigger than she'd expected it to be. Over the following weeks, carefully, quietly, like testing a floorboard before trusting it with her full weight, Chloe began to experiment. She painted a stray cat curled up, warm and safe, in a doorway that had, the evening before, been empty and cold. The next morning, there it was, sleeping soundly in that exact doorway, and stayed there being fed scraps by the deli owner for a week after. She painted the flickering lamp on the corner of Elm Street, burning bright and steady, instead of the tired half-light it had struggled along with for months. It never flickered again. She painted the little courtyard behind the bakery, bare and paved over for years, filled in with a tumble of climbing roses along the back wall. 3 days later, her mother mentioned, over dinner, that the bakery owner had decided quite suddenly to put in a rose garden. Couldn't say what had given her the idea, only that she'd woken up wanting one rather badly. Chloe began, very carefully, to understand the size of what she'd been given. It didn't rewrite the whole city on a whim, and it didn't work on the things that mattered most, gravely or grandly, or all at once. She tried, once, painting an end to a whole string of grey days in a row, and the sky stayed exactly as grey as it pleased, same as always. It seemed to work best on the small, kind, ordinary things. Not miracles, just gentleness, offered somewhere it hadn't quite reached on its own. And so, evening after evening, that became her quiet work. She painted warm coats folded neatly on cold benches for whoever might need one. She painted the cracked step outside the old folks' home smoothed over and safe underfoot. She painted a lonely-looking dog in the shelter window, curled up beside a second dog instead, because she'd overheard the shelter workers saying he pined dreadfully without company. She painted the tired bus driver on the late route, a fresh thermos of tea steaming on his dashboard, just because she thought he looked like he could use it. She never painted anything grand. She never tried to fix every sadness in the whole city in one evening. And in time, she came to understand, without anybody telling her outright, that this was exactly as it should be. A city wasn't meant to be mended all at once by one girl with a paintbrush. It was meant to be tended, a little bit, carefully, night after night, by somebody who loved it enough to keep showing up. She never told anyone what the paints could do. Not because she'd been asked to keep it secret, but because she found quite naturally that she didn't want to. It felt like the sort of thing that worked better quietly. The nicest kindnesses usually do. The ones that arrive without a name attached, so that nobody has to feel indebted and everybody just gets to feel looked after in some small, unexplainable way. Sometimes, painting some ordinary corner of the skyline, her hand would simply want to add something kind, unprompted, the same pull she'd felt that very first evening with the geraniums, and she learned to trust that instinct completely. It was never wrong. It always knew, somehow, exactly where a little extra warmth was needed, even in corners of the city Chloe herself had never visited and couldn't have named. She did once ask her grandmother about it directly, old enough now to ask plainly rather than sideways. Her grandmother only smiled, the smile she always wore when a question pleased her. and said that the paints had always worked that way, for as far back as anyone in the family could properly remember, and that the trick of it, the only trick there really was to paint with real love for the thing you were painting, and never for what you might get from painting it. The moment you start painting for yourself, she said, is the moment it stops working at all. It's not that kind of magic. It never asks to be thanked, and it never ought to be used to ask for anything back. Chloe held on to that carefully, the one piece of instruction that actually mattered, and she found over the years that it was true. She never tried to paint herself rich or lovely or lucky in love, though she thought about it now and then, as anyone might. Whenever she tried, her hands simply refused to cooperate. The brush would go stiff and clumsy in her fingers. The colours would come out muddy and wrong, until she gave up and painted something kind for somebody else instead. And the moment she did, the brush moved easy and sure again, same as always. So she kept on. Every evening, without fail, the same ritual. Stool to the windowsill, paints in their usual order, water from the tap, a whole city painted lovingly back to wellness, one small kindness at a time, by a girl who never once put her own name to any of it. Years later, many years later, when Chloe had grown and the wooden paint box had gone soft and worn at every corner from all her own handling, she still kept the ritual. Stool to the sill, paints in order, the city spread out below, glittering itself gradually to sleep. And by then, there was a granddaughter of her own, small and curious, who liked to sit at her feet on painting evenings and watch the brush move, and who asked one night why Grandma always looked so pleased with herself over something as ordinary as a painting of a bus stop. Chloe only smiled her own grandmother's smile back at her, and reached for the little wooden box and said that some paints simply liked to be used properly, and that she rather thought it was about time she explained exactly what that meant. There's something rather nice, I think, about the idea of a whole city being looked after quietly by somebody at a windowsill with a paintbrush, never asking for thanks, never making a fuss of it. I dare say it happens more often than any of us realize, in one form or another. You don't need to paint anything tonight, or fix anything, or look after anyone but yourself. Just let your eyes go heavy, and let the rest of it wait until morning. Sleep well, dear insomniac. Good night.